right. So last Thursday, so forget that. Where are we? Let me structure where we are. We have begun with an explanation of Nietzsche's interpretation of Greek tragedy. And we did three things in that. We identified, one, that for Nietzsche, Greek tragedy represents a comprehensive worldview. Two, for Nietzsche, Greek tragedy also produces what he calls the tragic or heroic perspective. And we gave a whole 4 or 5 characteristics that define the tragic and the heroic perspective for Nietzsche. In fact, he wants to seduce us into becoming these people. And then the third thing we saw in Nietzsche's understanding of Greek tragedy is that the tragedy as a worldview produces heroic individuals who then, the third thing in this first part, produce profound works of art. We talked about that this culture and these people produce actual works of art, like Sophocles' Antigone. Okay? That's the first thing we did. And then the second thing we did is we said, look, Nietzsche's analysis and interpretation, his valorization of Greek tragedy in general, leads to his critique of metaphysics, leads to his critique of Socratic and Platonic metaphysics. And we said, well, what is it specifically about metaphysics that Nietzsche criticizes? And we said, we had a whole lecture, 2 whole lectures on what metaphysics is, what metaphysical philosophy and metaphysical religion and what metaphysical enlightenment is, right? I'm not going to repeat it, it's too much, but it's there. That was the second thing. And then we said, well, Nietzsche's critique of metaphysics takes us to step 3, his kind of introduction of what we now call postmodernism. What is postmodernism? Through Nietzsche's analysis of Greek tragedy, we are also going to be introducing to some very general but powerful themes of postmodern political philosophy. Okay, what's that? Well, there are 2 themes. Postmoderns are very suspicious about the existence of what Socrates and Plato and Christianity and the Enlightenment call the truth. They're very suspicious about the existence. But more importantly, right, because at the end of the day, they're in no better position to answer the question, does God exist or not exist? Right? At the end of the day, what really motivates postmodern critique is the second theme. And all postmoderns ask, what are the consequences to our minds, our mental and intellectual stability or well-being, to our minds, our bodies, and our politics that result from our belief in and commitment to some type of moral metaphysics? And we talked about all of that, right? Now, this brought us to the 4th and last theme that we're going to talk about for this outline for this series of lectures. And we said, okay, well, all right, we know that postmodernists are very suspicious about the existence of an objective truth, thought in its various ways, and they're very concerned about the consequences to our minds, bodies, and politics that result from that belief in that truth and our commitment to its way of life, to a moral way of life. All right, okay, we got that. Now, 4, and this is where we started on Thursday, well, how is it, what's the tool? What tool do postmodernists use to critique metaphysics, right? How do they actually go about illuminating this idea that they're very suspicious about an objective truth, right? How do they do it, right? Because the first theme of postmodernism is Nietzsche and Foucault and Derrida, right? Judith Butler, Lyotard, right? These thinkers are very suspicious about Christian God or Plato's objective justice. They're very suspicious about this. They're suspicious about claims of human nature. All right. What theoretical tool or apparatus do they use to mobilize that suspicion, right? How? And what theoretical tool do they use to help us start to see or to investigate, even in our own minds, right, or on our own bodies or in our own politics, the consequences that have come to us from our belief in some type of theological metaphysics or enlightenment sort of normative social and behavioral sciences. What tool, right? And that is nominalism. That's the fourth point. And we started it on Thursday. We're going to finish it today. Right? And so nominalism is the tool. It's the theoretical tool. Right? It's the tool, the perspective that postmodernists use to critique metaphysics, to advance their critique, to do their critique. Because it's not enough simply to say, well, I'm suspicious about the truth, and gee, I think the consequences to our minds, bodies, and politics are terrible. You can't say things like that and then not demonstrate it, right? You can't mobilize those observations. So how does postmodernism actually critique metaphysics, right? And that's the path we've been following. All right, and so they critique it by nominalism, right? And the first thing we said, and it's right there on your outline, just typed up for you, is that the first thing you got to know is that nominalism is an alternative theory of what language is and how language works. That's the key, right? So the theoretical tool that postmodernists use to critique metaphysics is called nominalism. And what is nominalism? Nominalism is an alternative account, an alternative theory, or an alternative account about, it's a different story. It's an alternative account about what language is. Very important, that what. It's an alternative account to what language is, and equally important, it's an alternative account to how language operates and where you and I are situated in what language is and how language operates. Okay, so the tool is nominalism. Nominalism is an alternative interpretation, a story, an interpretation, theory, an account. Use any word you want. Nominalism is an alternative interpretation of what language is, how language operates, and three, how you and I are situated inside what language is and how it operates. Okay? That's the tool. Okay? Now, we've already seen a little bit of this when we talked about what it is that the tragic Greeks understood, what makes the heroic perspective heroic. But now we're going to kind of formalize it as a theoretical perspective. Okay? Now, what we did on Thursday, right, and we kind of had to stop for a minute. Okay? We had to stop for a minute. And we said, okay, before we actually talk about nominalism more specifically, we have to say a few things about why nominalism is an alternative account of what language is and how it operates and its relationship to the human, right? Because I said nominalism is an alternative account of what language is, how it operates, and how that relates to what it means to be human, or how we think of what it means to be human, right? And you would say to yourself, well, alternative to what, right? It's alternative to what? If you say nominalism is an alternative account of language, that presupposes or assumes that it's alternative to something. What is nominalism as a theory of what language is and how it operates alternative to? Okay, and that was the whole lecture on Thursday. It's important to really kind of understand even where we are now, this moment and the juxtaposition. And so we spent all Thursday saying, well, nominalism is an alternative account of language to metaphysics, right? All metaphysical theories, in addition to making statements about the truth as essential concepts in human nature and the natural world, and statements about humans being rational, having some ability to acquire it, statements about the purpose of life being the acquisition of that knowledge so you can apply it and live well, right? In addition to the fact that metaphysics, all different systems of metaphysical thought make those claims, right? They also, and this is what we did Thursday, they also make very important assumptions about what mind is, what the content of mind is, right? And what language is, right? And this is incredibly important, right? And we said all metaphysical systems of thought assume, they have to assume, right, that the content in our mind, in our reason, or the content in our soul, right, or the content that is in our mind as we have access to scientific laws and natural and biological laws, all that content has to always already be where?
In our minds.
In us.
Yeah, it's got to be in us. It's already, Plato will say it's in us by nature, right? Nature implanted that knowledge of justice in us, right? The metaphysically, theologically minded people will say, well, that content's in our soul, and God put that in there. It's already, you're born with it, right? It's always already been there since you were born. So it's already in there. The content's in there. And in fact, Plato had famously said that knowledge is a type of memory. This is literally Plato's epistemology, right? Because we're born and all that content is in our mind, but we grow, and sometimes we grow up in the wrong cultures, or with wrong mythos. We grow up in the wrong cave, right? And what we think is true is just shadows. Right, and philosophy, in a fascinating way for Plato, philosophy was technically a kind of memory. Philosophy helps us remember what's already in our minds, right? Becoming aware that God exists is the first step to, oh, I have a soul, and I have an opening to all this knowledge that God put in there, right? So the content's there. It's really important. And then two, it's not just for metaphysics, for philosophy and theology and science, it's not just that the contents in your mind, but there's also the correct words for the content. There are correct words and correct meanings for the content, right? So literally in the whole history of philosophy, right, beginning with Plato, and Hegel, right? This is true for Hegel. This is true for Marx. This is true for Kant. The whole journey of philosophy in some way is trying to find the right word, right? And not just the right word, but the right definition. That somehow corresponds, coheres, or corresponds with the truth. So it's not just that there's content in our mind, but that there's actually a word. There are true words. There are true words, and there are true meanings to true words. And that with a lot of work, either philosophically or theologically or scientifically, we can find those true words and those true meanings that kind of correspond to the content that's already in our mind, and that somehow connects us to what? The truth, right? So all metaphysical systems of thought, right? And this is why I write on the outline. For all metaphysical systems of thought, language understood as philosophical language, or divine revelation in religion, or science, right? You think about science, right? Right now, here in Switzerland, in the CERN, right? They've got the largest hadron collider in the world, the CERN, right? And they're breaking up these things, and they're looking for dark matter. They're literally looking for the God particle. Right? They built this technology, and they're smashing these atoms, and they're trying to glimpse dark matter, or things that are happening with dark matter, and they call it the God particle. They literally call it the God particle. And then, right, they assign numbers, right? They assign a kind of symbolic language. That's what x plus y plus and the infinity and the pi and the square and the differential calculus. They apply numbers, and they think that equation is going to somehow speak the truth of the cosmos, speak the truth of physics. Just like if you're Christian, you think that the Bible speaks the truth of God, or the Quran speaks the truth of the prophet. Just like Plato thought you could find the correct word and the correct meaning for justice. Right? So for all metaphysical systems of thought, language is a medium. Language is a medium. It's a medium to the truth. It's a bridge to the truth, ultimately, potentially. It's a medium. It's a correspondence. It's a coherence. Right? Language, thought, content in the mind, and language functions as a kind of medium, a correspondence between the pure objective ideas or the pure God out there and human beings. Right? So there is real content of the truth already inside our minds or our souls. And we can equip ourselves with a language, either through discovery or through divine revelation, and a meaning to that language, those words, that corresponds to that truth. Right? And this is the core thing to know about all metaphysical systems of thought with respect to content in our mind or our souls and language. And it's important to just kind of grasp that, even if it's in a basic way, so we can really understand what nominalism is. Okay? So what is nominalism? Now to nominalism, right? And now we can start to set up this juxtaposition. Nominalism is an alternative account of what language is, how it operates, and how human beings are situated within language. Okay? And it's an alternative to the metaphysical account of what mind and language is. Okay? Nominalism is an alternative account to metaphysics of what language is, how it operates, and how that relates to what it means to be you and I, who we are, and how we understand ourselves. Okay? We good? So nominalism is opposed to metaphysical theories of mind and language. Nominalism asserts an alternative account of what what language is, how it operates, and therefore what mind is, what the body is. Okay? All right. So nominalism is a theory of language that rejects the metaphysical theory of language as correspondence between human beings and the truth. That's the kind of technical way to put it. Nominalism is a theory of language that rejects the metaphysical theory of language as correspondence between human beings and the truth. And nominalism makes four major claims. There are four major elements of nominalism, some of which we've already seen, but we're gonna deepen the argument a little bit more, okay? And especially now we can deepen it now that we've kind of, in a very general way, identified what metaphysical theories, philosophy, theology, and science make about mind and language. Now, once we've seen that more deeply, then we can kind of talk about the four major assumptions of nominalism. And at a deeper level, we can kind of push on it a little more deeply. All right, so first, nominalists argue that in and of itself, even before you talk about language, the nominalists say, look, first, in and of itself, the things in the universe and the world and the processes that move them and animate them, the things and the processes in the world have no inherent meaning, value, order, or purpose. And just to say that a different way, in and of itself, the things out there, there's all sorts of things out there. Cosmos is massive; it's billions of years old. There's just an infinite number of things, as well as processes out there. And in and of themselves, those things and those processes, they don't possess an inherent meaning, value, order, or purpose. And to put this in another way, Nietzsche loved to talk like this. Rorty loves to talk like this. He says, what you got to do is you got to separate the idea. You got to separate two claims. You got to separate the claim that the truth is out there, that things are out there, and the truth is out there. You got to separate those two things. All right, and Nietzsche will say, look, there are all sorts of things and processes. There are all sorts of things and processes that are the effects of causes that have nothing to do with human mind. Out there, there are all sorts of things and processes that are the effects that are being caused, that are the effects of things, other things, that have nothing to do with human states of mind. Now, all of those things exist. All of those things, and I just call them things because we don't have other words for them. Those words haven't been invented yet because we haven't encountered them. We haven't seen them. There are all sorts of things out there, billions and billions and billions and billions of things. And there's all sorts of processes kind of moving and affecting and causing those things. So there are all sorts of things and processes that are the effects of causes that have nothing to do with mental states. And those things and those processes in and of themselves don't possess a meaning. They don't have a word. They don't have a meaning. They don't have a value. They don't have a purpose. They don't have an order. They're real. They're real. They exist. They're not figments of our imagination, right? There's a cosmos out there. There's all sorts of extraordinary, crazy things out there. I can't wait to encounter them so we can invent a word and try to fucking describe them and have some fun with them, right? But they exist. They are things and processes that are the effects of causes that have nothing to do with my what? My mind. They're totally independent of my mind. In fact, they've been going on for billions and billions. They've existed for billions of years. They've been going on for billions of years. Think of the sun. Think of Malibu. Right? Think of Malibu. Right? For billions and billions of years, the sun rose over the eastern mountains. Right? And it came up. And it came over the Pacific coast, and it came over Malibu, right? And it set into the Pacific Ocean. Billions of years. Billions of years. In and of itself, beautiful, not beautiful. Romantic, not romantic. Valuable as clifftop property over the ocean or not? No. For billions of years, the sun has come up over the east, It's across the sky, set in the Pacific. In and of itself, that process, those things and those processes are effects of causes that have nothing to do with human what? Mind. And they've existed and they've operated. And they've existed and operated for billions of years without having any what? Meaning. Hey, that's a sun, right? And this is the beach, and that's the ocean. And isn't that interesting, right? And value. Oh, look how valuable this land is. Look how beautiful this land is. Look how romantic that land is. And purpose. Oh, we're gonna build fucking condominiums, and we're gonna sell this land to Brad Pitt, and he can buy his $10 million fucking compound, right? For billions of years, that thing and that process existed and was an effect of causes that have nothing to do with human minds. It existed, but in and of itself, it does not possess what? Meaning. It didn't even possess a word. There were no words for these things. It didn't possess a word. It didn't possess a meaning. And if it didn't possess a word and a meaning, it couldn't have value. And if it didn't possess a word, a meaning, and value, it couldn't be organized into some purpose. Hey, this is the purpose of life. So the first general claim that nominalism makes, the first alternative claim to metaphysics that nominalism makes is, look, in and of itself, cosmos and the earth, even life, in and of itself, the cosmos, the earth, and even life, in and of itself does not possess inherent, objective, inherent meaning, value, or purpose. Doesn't possess it. Okay? Now, before everybody freaks out, let's just stop. Now, that doesn't mean that life doesn't have any meaning or value or purpose. In fact, if you look around, if you look in your room, or you look where you are, or you look around, everywhere you see, what do you see? Meaning, value, or purpose. So obviously, there's lots of meaning, and there's lots of value, and there's lots of purpose. In fact, you and I are caught up in that whole constellation of phenomena, produced by it in some ways. Okay. So for the nominalists, in and of itself, the cosmos and things and the world and things in it and processes and human, in and of itself, these things don't have meaning. They're real, but they can't be true. They're real, but they can't be true. In fact, what postmodernists like to do, what nominalists like to do, is to begin the separation between things that are real and things that are what? True. To separate those two things. So things can be real, right? There's all sorts of real things out there, all sorts of real processes out there, that they are effects, that are the effects of causes. They have nothing to do with human mind. In fact, in many ways, we haven't encountered them yet. We haven't had a probe that's gone deep enough, or we haven't had some technology that helped us capture subatomic particles and quantum entanglement. We haven't encountered it yet, and because we haven't encountered it yet, we don't have a word for it. Okay, it's real, but they have nothing. But what they are and how they operate, they're the effects of causes that have nothing to do with human mind. They don't have any inherent meaning, value, or purpose. They exist and they're real, but they don't have any inherent meaning. Okay, that's the first thing. Now, again, at a very deep level, this is something the nominalist, this is something Nietzsche wants you to never forget. And this is really, really effing important, because this is, for Nietzsche and the postmoderns, this is the escape out of metaphysics, out of a kind of servitude to metaphysics, right? Life itself I mean, our life has meaning. Of course it has meaning. Nick Dungy's life has meaning. But what's the source of that meaning? Where does that meaning come from? That's the question. And what are the consequences to my mind, my body, my politics for my belief that the meaning comes from certain somewhere and that I got to live a certain way? Right? If I can begin the process of thinking to myself, well, look, in and of itself, the cosmos and the world and the things in the world, they don't have any inherent meaning. Okay. Which means that, okay, so whatever meaning is here, right, that I've acquired, that has kind of produced me, that is expressive of who I am. Okay, where did that come from? Right? Where did that come from? If the cosmos and the world and things, and even in the natural world, in and of themselves don't have meaning, where did that meaning come from? Well, second thing, in addition to this argument that in and of itself, the world has no inherent meaning, value, or purpose, two, and we've already seen this in Nietzsche's kind of account of the tragic perspective. Two, language, meaning, value, and purpose are human inventions. They are human constructions. And if we were in class, we could do some of this on the whiteboard. So I apologize. It's easier if we kind of put it on the whiteboard or the chalkboard and walk through this. But they're quite literal about this, right? And they begin even at the level of what they call the mark, right? So think about an alphabet. Right, and we'll just use our alphabet, right? The Romantic alphabet, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Think about each little A. Think of each little A as a kind of mark. There's a little A, it's a mark. And there's a little B, a mark. It's literally, think of it as and I mean mark literally. It's a mark. It's a little kind of O with a little tail. It's a mark. It's a woo whoop, or it's a B. It's a woo boop, or it's a C. It's ooh, this is fun. Ooh, it's a C. It's a mark that looks like that. The nominalists, they call it marks. Letters are marks. Letters start as marks. And at some point in primordial history, in time, these marks, literally, we haven't even talked about words or meanings yet. We're just talking about scribbles. We're just talking about marks. We're talking about scratches. Scratches, you could call this is a little scratch. This is another type of scratch. That's another type of scratch. For the nominalists, at some point, in and of itself, the world has no inherent meaning or value or purpose, no word. And at some point, too, whatever language is, and language even at the most basic element of the letter, which in this kind of semiotic theory, postmodern nominalist language theory, they call marks. The technical term for the word in the theory language is it's a mark. And they literally mean a scratch or a mark or a symbol. Right? Here it is. Hey. And I suppose you could argue that they're connected to some phonetic thing, be, but I'm not sure what the connection is between that mark and the phonetic ah. Okay. These marks, these scratches, are entirely arbitrary. They're arbitrary. And by arbitrary, they're random. And I mean this is very important. They're random. right? And if we had, again, for this class, if there's a challenge not being in class together, we could be doing all of this on the whiteboard and we could see it up there. But often in class, and even in our class, we have 30 people. CSUN's one of the most diverse campuses on planet Earth. Literally, I mean, that's a fact. There are more languages spoken on CSUN, at CSUN, than just about anywhere else in the world. There's over 100 languages recognized and spoken in some capacity on the CSUN campus. It's one of the most diverse educational spaces in the entire world. And I bore you when I say that, because if we had the whiteboard, we could, no doubt there are people in the class who speak Korean. There are people who speak Chinese. My wife is half Algerian, half Czech. She speaks Arabic, right, fluently. She writes and speaks Arabic. And if we could have different people come up and do their alphabet, right? What's the Arabic mark for the letter A? What's the Chinese symbol for the letter A, right? If we could start comparing marks as the basic building block of what we call alphabets, from which we produce words, from which to which we attach meaning, in which things get value, right? If we could do that, this visually makes more sense. But for nominalism, these marks are arbitrary. There's no reason, there's no metaphysical or objective or inherent reason why the English A looks the way it does. And this is untrue. I'm just going to make something up. I don't know what the A in Arabic is, but if it's something like that, right? There's no objective difference why this is A and in Arabic that is A. Of course it's not. So forgive me. I know I'm making a mistake. I'm making an example. Right? Do you understand these marks? Here is the Arabic mark for A. It's not, but it's an example. Here it is. Here's the English mark or scratch for A. These marks or scratches are absolutely arbitrary. They're random. And because they are arbitrary and random, they are types of human invention. So for nominalists, it's not just that in and of itself, the world, the things, and life and processes have no inherent meaning, value, or purpose. It is literally at the most basic building blocks of what we call language, made up of words that have meaning, meanings that have value, and the way all that gets put into grammatical sentences for coherence. For nominalism, even the beginning, the marks are arbitrary. They're random. And the important point here, now as we start to juxtapose it with metaphysics, there is, you ready? There is no correspondence between this mark or this mark and some essence out there. Right? There is no correspondence between a mark, say the letter A, and some essence called a-ness out there, some pure A or some pure idea. The marks are human inventions and they're totally random. They do not correspond to an essence out there or to the things they signify. This is really important. I know it's clumsy. They don't signify. Well, they don't correspond to the things they represent. Okay, let's take it one step further, and then this will become a little clearer. All right, so we have all these marks. In the English alphabet, we have 26 of them. Some alphabets have 30 marks. Some alphabets have hundreds of marks, right? right? Our system, our alphabet, our system of scratches, our fully arbitrary, invented system of scratches to signify potentially things, to represent things, are totally human inventions. And from those scratches, so we got N, we got an I, we got a C, we got a K. And we have these independent, totally arbitrary human invention scratches. See the N and see the I and see the K, see the C and the K? See that? And we take these individually autonomous and random and arbitrary scratches, and what do? We put them together, we arrange them to make what?
Words.
What's that?
Words.
Words. Right? Words. We put all of these things together to make a what? A word. Now, this is a kind of bad example because it relates to a name, but we could do the same thing. We could take this random arbitrary scratch and this random arbitrary scratch and this random arbitrary scratch, and we could put all of these things together to make a word. All right? And we put them together, and now we have a word called tree. We've got a word called tree. Now it's a word. And by the way, the word is also, is it something that corresponds to some essence out there, or is the word also a human invention? It's a human invention. It's a word made of other little scratch human inventions. So now we've got this word. Now the word becomes a word because at some point someone said, hey, we're going to put these marks together to form this word, and we're going to use this word to signify. And that's the correct word, to signify. Or another correct word, to represent, to stand for, to represent, to signify that thing out there in the forest that is tall, and it's got these things like this, and it's got these green things on it. We're going to use this word to represent that stuff we are encountering or we are seeing in the world. So the word tree is a human invention. And it's a human invention purposely designed to signify extant things. Things that are in reality. Again, we're going back. There are all sorts of things and processes out there that are the effects of causes that have nothing to do with what? Human what? Mind. Are they real? Of course they're real. They're not figments of my imagination. The universe and the cosmos and the natural world and other effing human beings are not figments of my imagination. They're real. And there's all sorts of those things out there that we haven't encountered, that we haven't assigned a name so it can signify some weird shit we've just stumbled on or encountered. So for nominalism, the letters are arbitrary. The words that are made up of the arbitrary letters are themselves human inventions. So you have different words for cat in different languages, different words for trees. You've got different geometries. You've got different systems of physics and geometries and mathematics. And the important thing, even at this point already to know, is that for nominalism, the letters nor the way the letters are put into words, in this case, tree, created to signify that thing. Those things are purely they're arbitrary and they're human inventions. They do not correspond. There's no correspondence between the word tree and that thing in the forest. It's not like we're going to discover the correct word for tree or the correct definition for tree. It doesn't exist. It can't. And it can't already for two reasons. One, because all that shit in and of itself doesn't have meaning, value, or purpose. It's real, but it doesn't have an inherent meaning. It's only humans, very, very, very late, in a very, very narrow space of cosmic time, who end up on the Malibu shores and think, oh, fuck, it's beautiful. Wow, look how beautiful this is. Oh, it's romantic. Oh, I want to sit here with my lover and have some champagne. Huh, well, fuck. Lots of people want to do this, so it must be valuable. Yeah, it's going to cost you $10 million. I hope you've got game. Huh. Well, the purpose of life is to work really hard, make lots of money, go live next to fucking Brad Pitt. All that meaning, all that value, all that purpose it was at some point in time invented by who? Humans. Humans. Like I said, for billions of years, the sun came up over the San Fernando Valley, crossed the sky, stopped in the Pacific. No one gave a shit. Why? Didn't have meaning. Didn't have value. Didn't have a purpose. It's real. It exists. It happens. Okay? But in and of itself, it doesn't have meaning, value, or purpose. And not only that, just to have some fun with this, right? Just to have some fun. Just to make a stupid point. Even the idea that Malibu is beautiful, the sunset on the Pacific Ocean is beautiful. And it's got this meaning. It's a romantic meaning. And then it has value. And then it gets organized into a series of purposes. Yeah, everybody wants it. Everyone wants to live next to Brad Pitt. Even that little constellation of words and meanings and values and purpose, even that is only 50 years old. 100 years ago, nobody gave a damn about Malibu. There were still people, and the people had their words and their meanings, but that wasn't me. 100 years ago, if you were alive and you drove from Camarillo to Santa Barbara, if you were alive and you had your little Model A car, your Model T car, you know, and you're from Camarillo to Santa Barbara, from LA to Santa Barbara, Camarillo to Santa Barbara, and you went up that whole coast from Camarillo to Santa Barbara, what did you see?
Ocean and mountains?
Nope. Mile after mile after mile after mile of oil rigs, crude, early industrial oil rigs, those kinds that go like that pump, you know, those iron horse oil rigs, right? Miles and miles, every 10 feet, every 50 feet, miles, and up the whole damn coast, the whole beach, the entire beach from Camarillo to fucking Rincon. All the way up through Summerlin, all the way through Montecito, where fucking Oprah lives. Montecito. Other than the Hamptons, the most wealthiest zip code in America, Montecito, just south of Santa Barbara, where Oprah lives. Right on the beach. 60 miles of beachfront property. Row after row of oil rig. right on the beach, literally right on the beach. They built them on the sand, and they were sucking the oil out of the ocean, out of the tidal zone. Thousands of them. Polluting the beaches, the oil spills, the tar that was being pulled up. If you see pictures, Google old pictures of Camarillo or Ventura, or Google the beachscape. It's a hell zone. It's a hellscape of oil drilling, industrial, post-apocalypse. It looks like some out of Mad Max. Why? People didn't value the beach for what we now value it for. It didn't mean it. It meant oil. It meant money. It meant they don't give a shit about environment. No one gave a shit about beach as beauty. No one gave. There weren't $1 million houses on the beach. There were oil rigs. So even the whole idea that the sunset over Malibu is beautiful, it's meaningful, it's romantic, it's values, it's perfect. Even that, brand new. It's 50 years old. So in and of itself, cosmos and the world and natural things, ultimately even life itself, has no inherent meaning, value, or purpose. 2, every letter in the alphabet, every word that those letters produce, cat and tree and Nick, those are fundamentally and inescapably arbitrary, and they're human inventions. And by the way, they're very important inventions, because that's the way in which the world comes to have meaning. But they are created to signify something. They're created to represent something that we encounter in the world or in the cosmos, doesn't matter. Now, to be a little more technical, to talk about how language then kind of evolved from this point of view. So, all right, so I've got my little, so I've put my little letters together, right? And I've created this tree. Now, technically, the nominalists will call that a sign. It's a sign. It's a sign for something. Like I said, it represents something. It's a sign for something. What is this word? It's a sign. A sign of what? That thing. You see this word, cat? It's a sign. A sign for what? Those horrible things. Not a cat person in this house. Joke. It's a sign. And literally the nominalists say this is a sign. Now, signs, my sign, at some primordial point in history, becomes a word. Signs become words when a group of people, I don't know what the magic number is, there's no magic number, but when a group of people, for whatever reasons, decide to accept, to agree, that this sign, tree, will be a sign that represents those things. So our little community, our little 30 people in our class, our little primordial community, for whatever reason, kind of agree, tree, that's a sign for that. So signs become words when people agree to the meaning assigned to the sign. When people collectively begin to agree to the meaning attached to the sign. Right? Because technically I could have my own private, in a weird way, I could invent my own words. In fact, this is what art does all the time. Rap does this, art does this. James Joyce wrote a whole fucking novel called Ulysses that no one can read because he reinvented the fucking English language. And by the way, it was the most important novel of the 20th century. Okay? So you can have signs, and they're your kind of thing. They're your kind of, hey, that's my little magic secret word, my little sign. It's not a word yet, it's a sign. But if everybody starts agreeing that Nick Dungy's sign is a pretty cool way of representing or signing whatever that is, right? Oh, the meaning, that's kind of cool. then the sign becomes a word. And words, what words are technically, they're still arbitrary, they're still human inventions, but words are things that have a meaning that people, for the most part, collectively what? Agree to. Yeah, so we agree, generally, that this word tree signs or means things that are in forests, stuck in the ground. Some are tall, some are small, some have these kind of leaves, some have different kind of leaves, but okay, they're all trees. So when I say tree, you guys kind of understand trees. When I say, hey, isn't that a beautiful tree? You don't bring me a glass of milk. Right? You understand the word and the meaning. You understand the word, the reference, and the sign. And this, for the nominalist, is the origin of language. The marks, the A's, and the B's, and the C's, and the T's, they're arbitrary. They're total inventions, and they have no correspondence to the essence of that. There's no essence of that little A out there in the cosmos. It's human invention. It's arbitrary. You put those letters together to make a word: cat, or bat, or Nick, or love, or beautiful. Because we can talk about things and concepts. Let's put marks together to make words to talk about concepts, like justice. Okay, it's important, right? Because here we are, and we're in this little community, and somehow we have to have these rules and these laws, and okay, we need words to represent those things. But those words and the meanings are arbitrary. So in and of itself, the world has no inherent meaning. It doesn't have a word. There's no word. Meaning, value, or purpose. 2, all words, all meanings, all values and purposes are human inventions. And because they're human inventions, they do not reveal the essence of the things they represent. They do not reveal the truth of the things they represent. There's no correspondence between words and things. There's no correspondence between words and truth. There is no truth out there. And we'll have the whole rest of the semester to unpack this. 3, the third major, and this is so critical. I said this the first day we met. I'm going to say it every day until we leave. This is perhaps one of the most important things to get your heads around. If you get your heads around this, you understand Nietzsche. You understand Foucault. You understand Derrida. You understand Judith Butler, which is talking about the construction of gender. You understand this. This is the move. This is the key move. If you get this key move conceptually, you own it. 3, because every word, every meaning, and the value and the purposes that are caught up in it, because those things, because, this is the key, because they are arbitrary originally, and because they are human inventions, and because they name, because they give meaning, and through naming and meaning derive value and purpose, because words do that. Words and meanings as human inventions are also simultaneously exercises of what?
Power.
Power. They are exercises of power. This is the key. There is no word, there is no meaning, there is no value, and there is no purpose to which these things are mobilized. That is not simultaneously an exercise of power. It has to be. Because yours at some primordial core level, you're the one that's asserting what the word is, what the thing means, how it's valuable. That's power. In and of itself. Forget even now, for the present purpose, who ultimately comes to control words and meaning and value. Forget even get that. That's part of it, but that's not even where we are now. Just the act of doing that. Just the act of speaking. This is, as Nietzsche famously said in the genealogy in the first essay, the lordly right of giving names can be seen as the original act of power. This is this. This name, this meaning, this value. That is power. And it's not just power, it's the process through which reality becomes meaningful. Language is a human invention. I mean language broadly. Language is a human invention, and it's simultaneously an exercise of power. This is the most important thing you can ever, kind of in this class, one of the most important things you can grasp. And then 4, because we're out of time, because it's a human invention, and because it's expressed in a world that's massive and in many ways indifferent to it, all language is contingent. Now, if something is contingent, it means 2 things. One, it's not grounded in anything, right? It doesn't correspond to any truth. It's an invention. It's not grounded. It's a word. It's an invented thing. It's not grounded. There's no metaphysical necessity for it. And because it's not grounded, it's constantly undergoing what?
Changes?
Change. Often contested change. More on that later. All right, we're out of time. Say a few more things about this very briefly on Thursday, and then we take a step back and we really start to tell the story about Nietzsche's analysis of the birth of tragedy by going to the outline, the Homeric myths.
Thank you.
Thank you,
You guys
Professor.
good? Are you feeling this, you guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Professor, have you posted the midterm already? The question
What's that?
for the midterm?
What about it?
Have you posted?
Yeah, you have it. It's on the Canvas page under the file.
Ah, okay, because I printed the other stuff. I guess I didn't realize
Yeah.
it. Thank you so much.
So for Jennifer, I think so the midterm, Jennifer, this is a good question, all right?
Yeah.
Look, Professor Dungy's an idiot. Don't ever forget that. Which means that I'm not very good at titling things and posting them on Canvas. Because all of these things were for my own internal use, okay?
Okay.
So the reason I'm telling you this story is if you go on the Canvas page and you go and you look under the files, you're going to see all these little PDFs, okay? Now, if you look for the PDF that says PS 471 Revised Political Tragedy.
Revised political tragedy midterm. Oh,
That's the midterm. And by the way, that's making the whole damn point about nominalism. I named the midterm for my own internal purposes, because I never thought I would be sending any of this stuff to you on Canvas. I named my midterm Revised Political Tragedy. Whew. Wow. How fucking arbitrary is that? See? And by the way, you couldn't find it because you didn't know what the title meant. You didn't know what the title meant because it's Nick Dungy's secret title. My title. It's not a word. You don't see it.
yeah.
You get it?
Thank you so much, Professor. I just found it too. Appreciate it. A good
See?
one.
You see how powerful nominalism is?
Very powerful.
Ciao.
Ciao.
See you Tuesday.
Bye, Professor.
Love you guys.